Okay, I turned off the mic on the YouTube. Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Much better.
Okay, good. Anyway, welcome. I'm very happy to introduce the speakers for today. First, our MC, Tom Lamaine. And then we have Joe Fordyce, Jeff Asch, Bill Werndl, Bill Vargus, and Merril Reese, and possibly Joe Pellegrino and Jim Murray will be arriving a little bit later. So since I know absolutely nothing about sports, I will leave it all up to you guys. Tom?
All right. Thanks, Jackie.
Sure.
Well, let's see. I guess if you want to start some topics, who will be the next Philadelphia Eagles coach? Check. Got that. Will the Phillies re-sign JT Realmuto? Check. Got that. The Flyers are in first place. Check. Got that. And the 76ers are in first place. Check. Got that.
All right.
So,
see you. Bye.
Since everything is all well in the world, I guess we should talk about the Philadelphia Union. So anybody who wants to jump in on that, go right ahead. In the meantime, now, hey, to be fair, I was a high school soccer ref for 5 years. New Jersey State Interscholastic Athletic Association badge is proudly displayed on one of my jackets. But that's hockey. That's soccer's another story here. Let's even though the mystery of who is going to be the next Eagles coach. Let's get some reaction to the naming of Mr. Sirianni as coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. And says down here, Jeff Asch, your last name begins with A.
Oh,
so
boy.
Alphabetically, Jeff, what's your spin on that?
Well, first off, from what I've seen so far, somebody should tell him that his shirt didn't match his jacket yesterday. It clashed. So he's got to start doing something about his fashion.
It's probably better than the front office not matching with the coach.
That's right. I don't know much about the guy, but obviously the Eagles did their due diligence. They interviewed a whole bunch of people. They thought that he was the right man for the job, and he's bringing in a couple of other young and up and coming coaches. And supposedly some people think it's the steal of all the coaches that were available, and some other people think that this guy is just not the right guy for this team and this quarterback. So we'll see.
Well, Merril, I talked to you earlier before the announcement was made, and we to recap Doug Peterson's situation. I think I presented it to you, Merril, as well as Bill on Bill Werndl's show. It seemed like Doug Peterson had just about had it, and his pride would not let him quit, even though he had some time left on his contract. But to me, it seemed like it led up to the point where he was looking for every possible reason for the front office to let him go. And I think maybe the final decision that he made in the last game of the season, well, maybe this will do it, putting the third string quarterback in there in a game that could have been won. So Merril, before we, unless you know more about Sirianni than Siri does. Hey, Siri, who's Sirianni? Merril, let's give me your spin on the whole situation with Doug Peterson.
Well, it's very, very unusual for a coach who won a Super Bowl 3 years ago to be out the door so quickly. I can tell you that I've been around a lot of coaches. This next year will be my 45th. And I rank Doug as one of the 3 best coaches I have been around. Dick Vermeil, Andy Reid, chronologically, and of course, Doug. 3 best coaches I have been around. Whoever decides to pick him up next year, I would imagine, is getting a very, very good coach, a great face of the franchise, and just a great person. So I was sorry to see him leave. But there comes Jeffrey referred to it as a difference in philosophy. Jeffrey said that he's looking long range, and Doug is looking short range. Well, when you have 2 years left on your contract, you better look short range because you never go into the last year anyhow. So I think Doug, frankly, wanted to control the quarterback situation. They've got a lot of money invested in Carson Wentz. I think Doug clearly felt that his quarterback going forward was going to be the young quarterback, Jalen Hurts. He liked him a lot. He gave Carson Wentz everything he possibly could. I know this is all just between us, so this is not the same conversation I would have before the millions listening to WIP.
Understood.
But I keep hearing the expression, the Eagles want to get a coach to fix Carson Wentz. I hate that expression. Fix Carson Wentz. He's not a flat tire. You don't come in and patch it up and then pump it up again and voila, he's fixed. You don't fix Carson Wentz. And for the longest time after last year, and last year he wasn't all that great. He picked it up against 4 weak teams at the end of the season. But this year I kept saying, you know what? He's going to be okay. So he starts out well and then throws the Washington game away with interceptions on opening game. Then he goes and he plays a bad Cincinnati. Well, he got killed by the Rams, ties Cincinnati, a team that the Eagles should have killed, has a little bit of an up game against San Francisco, but then we found out the 49ers weren't very good, and then comes back and goes into a tailspin. And I remember him in the end zone in Cleveland. Again, another winnable game. He's standing there in the end zone, and I'm saying the one thing as he takes the snap on the 1 yard line, I'm saying the one thing he cannot do is take a sack. He cannot take a sack. Excuse me. 1 minute.
Well, let me ask you this, Bill. I think so. In other words, the bottom line may be that if Doug Peterson had remained,
I got it. I'm okay.
If Doug Peterson had remained the coach of the Eagles, he might have wanted to start a quarterback that the front office did not want him to do.
Yes.
Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it's a fair statement, and I think Doug Peterson was leaning more towards Carson Wentz moving on, and I don't think it's a. I once heard Bill Parcells say, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. If you have 2 starting quarterbacks, you have no starting quarterback. Once in a blue moon, it works. You'll remember Jurgensen and Kilmer, but normally it doesn't. And they were in a situation where Carson was what he was. He kept getting worse. I was talking about Cleveland. He stood there in the end zone, and you could have counted 10 Mississippi, and he took a sack. And then the next week, they're in Green Bay, and he moves them down to about the 20, and he takes a sack. And now he cannot get sacked again, or they're out of field goal range. He takes another sack. I mean, he just stood there like a lamppost. And so finally, Doug got so frustrated that he felt he had to make a move.
Let me ask you this, Merril. If do you think the head coach should call the plays?
I'm sorry, the head coach call the plays?
Do you think the head coach should call the plays during the game?
The actual play calling itself? They all do.
Right. Well, I mean, a lot of them, I guess, get their suggestions from the offensive coordinator.
No, I think that's fine. I don't think it matters. I think, I found something out a long time ago. Sid Gilman was Dick Vermeil's offensive advisor. And one day I went to him in Washington. We were at the Crystal City Marriott the day before an Eagles-Washington game. And I was asking him, I always went over and bothered him because he was such a brilliant man. And I said to him, Coach, I said, explain to me how you use the hash marks in your passing game. And he said, Merril, sit down. He said, I'm going to tell you something. The most overrated thing in football is play calling. He said, each week we come into a stadium and there are 60,000 offensive coordinators sitting in the stands.
Well, Merril, let me ask you this: how many times did you think during the season when Carson Wentz was playing? Do you think he checked down an inordinate amount of times? In other words, kill, which means the play that came in is not the one the quarterback wants to run. Do you think that situation occurred more, or did occur in an inordinate amount of times?
I think it occurred a number of times, and I think that he would come over to the sideline and say to Doug Peterson, "Listen, the play that was in, we didn't have the look. When I looked downfield, it wasn't open for us, so I checked out of it." And then Doug would go back subsequently and look at the game tape, and it was exactly the look that was set up for that play. So Carson was doing what he wanted to do. He was not taking coaching well.
All right, let me ask. Let me go over to Bill Werndl. Bill, let me ask you this: in the hiring of Sirianni, do you feel the Eagles have basically hired a yes man, somebody who will do exactly what the front office tells him to do? As Merril said, it didn't look like it was going to be that way with Doug Peterson.
Well, again, he's been allowed to have input on his coaching staff, but the key thing is is he going to have control over his 53-man roster, 46 men who dress on Sunday, and how much input will he have in free agency and the draft? That's the most important thing for a head coach, is how he's going to meddle. I mean, we saw it last year when everybody was in accord, scouting department, other people saying, take Justin Jefferson if he's on the board at 21. The Eagles went outside the box and took Jalen Reagor. Justin Jefferson turned out to be the NFC or NFL Rookie of the Year on the offensive side of the ball. So how much input will Howie Roseman have in this whole setup with Nick Sirianni? I mean, that's the most important factor. If Nick is able to have a little more autonomy, it will be very, very beneficial to the team. But if Howie's going to meddle in a number of issues, we're in for a long, long run.
All right, Bill, that's you brought up an interesting point about the draft. For the first time in a long time, the Heisman Trophy was awarded to a wide receiver. I'm sure, you have to realize what the team's situation is that has the choice of picking either the wide receiver or the quarterback. Or you can just say, no, I don't care what the team needs. Let's do the old thing and pick the best player available. If you had the choice right now of picking a quarterback who is not named Trevor Lawrence or the wide receiver Devonta Smith, what would be your choice right now if you had that choice for the Philadelphia Eagles?
I'd take Devonta Smith without question. Brian Flores was at the Senior Bowl, the Miami coach, and everybody's talking about Devonta Smith is only 6'1", 175 or 180. He said this guy makes all the plays. And last week I had Eli Gold on, the voice of Alabama football. He said he's a good individual. He runs precise routes. He's very quick. He's a very smart receiver. You have to, when you look at that board, when you're going to make a selection, the best player available. In my humble opinion, Devonta Smith is the best player available and is a difference maker. The Eagles need difference makers on both sides of the ball.
All right, just pick any team at all. If you have the choice right now, who do you think, what quarterback, not named Trevor Lawrence, do you think will be selected next in the NFL draft?
The Wilson kid out of BYU. There's been mixed reviews on Justin Fields, even though he played well in the first playoff game. But the second one, Alabama, exposed him to a certain extent. I think he's dropping a little bit, but Wilson out of BYU. And I know people don't like BYU quarterbacks, but I think Wilson will be the second quarterback taken in that draft.
Tom, could I add one thing, Tom?
Sure.
I just want to point out, and I think Billy might even agree with me, and that is that other than Trevor Lawrence, I don't think there is any quarterback coming out in this draft who is any more talented than Jalen Hurts, who the Eagles already have.
Well, let me ask you
And
this,
that brings
Merril.
up an interesting question.
Oh, let me jump in here.
Go ahead.
This brings up a very
Wait,
interesting
let Bill
question.
Vargus get him. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you very much, Merril. It's not even a question in the draft necessarily just of Devonta Smith. As good as he is and the Heisman that he won and as incredible as he was in the championship game, a lot of people are saying that his teammate, Jalen Waddle, might go ahead of him because he has incredible speed. And there's also a kid at LSU that a lot of people are ranking as the top wide receiver in the draft. So, you know, it could be a situation where Smith isn't even considered the guy that they would want to get. But I want to go back to what Merril said because, you know, Merril, I respect you so much. And I know that you know Doug Peterson personally. So sometimes that may influence how you feel. But he did a horrific job this year, just a horrible job. And as you said, the millions on WIP, I think most of them realized, and those listening to the Fanatic and everybody else, that the consensus opinion came that, hey, he won a Super Bowl, but he won a Super Bowl because of his assistants. He won a Super Bowl because of Frank Reich. He won a Super Bowl because of the guys that left, DiFilippo and all the guys that left, because the last 3 years hasn't been the same. The play calling, and you said play calling isn't that important, but the play calling has been terrible. And, you know, they won a Super Bowl with a trick play with a Philly and never ran it again in 3 years, or never ran anything like it, or faked that play and ran another play. They became so incredibly predictable. And he continued.
Well, Bill, let me ask you this. Maybe the problem he had was he spent, and I, you know, listening to Doug Peterson after the games, maybe the problem he had with the bad play calling had something to do with the fact that he was spending a lot of his time protecting Carson Wentz and therefore protecting the front office for the big decision they made on Carson Wentz. My God, they just signed him to the biggest contract in the history of Eagles football and in the history of NFL in many ways. So maybe that came as a shock to Doug Peterson. I mean, even though he's in on all these meetings, I'm sure, but maybe that had a lot to do with, well, what the heck's going on here? And then when Carson wasn't producing, Doug had to take make the decisions that he made. And I think he was really handicapped to some degree as to what he would like to do. And I agree with you that he did lose some good brains in the offensive coordinator, the quarterback coach, and all of that. But, you know, how much are you going to take away from Doug Peterson with what he did in the Super Bowl year without Carson Wentz? And he said, you know, I might be able to do a lot better this year without Carson Wentz because I don't like the way he's playing. But, you know, the front office is probably giving me some subtle hints that you better not do that. And maybe, Bill, that had a lot to do with the play calling decisions that you refer to.
Well,
Yeah, but that's the whole point, is that if the play calling, you can protect Carson Wentz, first of all, by running the football. So you got a guy who's getting sacked at such an incredible rate that he ended up leading the league in sacks even after he was benched the last 4 games.
But those
every play, and you still won't run the ball. You're still calling a pass every down.
But those situations were Carson Wentz. You even heard Merril say
a lot of those plays, Bill. A lot of those plays he checked out of. A lot of the plays that Doug sent in, Carson Wentz on his own checked out of them. And a lot of those sacks, he was sacked 50 times. And we look at an offensive line that had 14 different combinations. 14 different times in 16 games, there was a different offensive line. Do you know how many of those 50 sacks were the sole responsibility of Carson Wentz? I would say 25. 25 were not the breakdowns. They were the fact that he sat back there like this, and you could have counted to 10 Mississippi, and the ball was still in his hand.
And that's his fault. That's what I'm saying. If he's
not Doug's, that's Carson.
No, it's Carson's fault, right? But I'm saying if your quarterback will not change and he continues to make the same mistakes over and over, but you're calling a pass every play, where's the sense in that, right, Jeff Asch? You agree with me?
I think that, forget the head coach, forget the play calling. Take a look at who was on the field. The Eagles had second and third stringers at almost every position especially on the offensive line. They had no linebackers. Their secondary was awful. And nobody talks about special teams. Their special teams sucked.
Well, you know why, Jeff? You know why? And Dave Phipp, who's a friend of mine, just left yesterday for the Lions. He's one of the best special teams coaches in football. He had got, as the special teams are a reflection of the talent on your starting 22. You guys know that.
Yep.
And so every time somebody goes down and you bring up someone from the special teams, your special teams are weakened.
Right.
Now, every week they lose guys, so they pick up guys, TL, who were around the league who were out of jobs, and they have to bring them to Philadelphia and quarantine them from Monday till Friday, bring them in for one practice on Saturday, and then send them out on the field to cover punts, block for kickoffs on Sunday. Half the guys didn't know each other's names.
Right.
They didn't know each other's names.
It's personnel.
Dave Phipp gets the blame.
Yeah,
I think the topic, I should have used the Eagles topic at the end because the end of the contract for the Zoom would have cut us off. But I'm going to have to stop it somewhere here and get to some other topics and some other members of our panel today. And let's the big story right now. And one thing about the Daily News, they really are. Their headline writers are superb. And Real Mucho, it says on the front page. And that is in response to the signing of our JT Realmuto to a new contract with the Philadelphia Eagles. Joe, let me ask you this: was this absolutely a necessary and a given to happen for the Philadelphia Phillies to do?
So I would say there's a couple things at play here, and this organization made a ton of promises to Bryce Harper when he came here. And Bryce's number one agenda was to keep Real Muto on the team. So I think there's a little bit, you have to give a little bit to your star player. And that's one of the things that went into it, I think. And secondly, I don't know much. I don't know how much this was the Phillies feeling like they needed to, as much as maybe they got a more realistic contract in their mind, because what was the market? You didn't hear about a ton of offers, and you see this across baseball this offseason. You see a lot of guys going out there and trying to get these monstrous contracts, and then you saw it with the Yankees. DJ LeMahieu was out there trying to get crazy money, and then eventually it comes back to the pack, and the Yankees get him for what they want to get him for. I'm not saying the money that the Phillies gave Real Muto is anything to, snub your nose at. It's great money, but
well, let's talk about position then. You mentioned DJ LeMahieu. If you had the choice of either of two players that you could have had, regardless of the contract, whatever it is, come on, are you going for the infielder who are LeMahieu? Are you going to go for the catcher, Realmuto?
I would say you're going for the catcher. You build your team up the middle of the field with your pitching, your catcher, your center.
Well,
field.
and one of the problems, and it still exists, the problems the Phillies have right now, and I guess Dombrowski's addressing this the best he can, but it's pitching, and I think the catcher, the catcher's in on every pitch. He's the most important player on the team when the game is on the defensive side, and I think the manager, Joe Girardi, who was a catcher, and I still to this day believe catchers make the best managers in baseball. And I don't think Joe really had a full season to handle the pitchers, or the new pitching coach had a full season. Of course, he's just in to handle the pitchers and make the difference. But let me ask you this, Joe. Basically, the Phillies are coming in, with the exception of a couple of relievers. The Phillies are coming into the season with the same players they had last year. They averaged 5 runs a game, and that still wasn't good enough, for them to go anywhere in the playoffs. So how do you think you fix that?
That's a good question, because I don't know. Take out, and we still don't know about the shortstop, right? It sounds like it might be Andrelton Simmons, who.
No. Simmons signed with somebody else today, I think.
Yes,
he's off the
this
board.
Morning?
He's off the board, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so then what's your, who's your shortstop? Who is your shortstop? And
The guy they still have, Didi.
Yeah.
Why not?
yeah, I mean, he could be. And
Anybody else?
you know,
He's 10 times better at the plate than Simmons, and
Absolutely.
he's pretty good defensively, and you already know what he can do for your team.
and he's
So-
gotten clutch hits in big spots when he was a member of the Yankees. But I think the Phillies need players in their lineup that the other team is afraid of, that the team has to game plan to pitch around or pitch carefully. And
I think they already have them.
other
I mean,
than Harper and
you
Real Muto, who are they?
Well, I got to believe their first baseman had a bad year because he was recovering from an injury. I don't think he was entirely healthy at the time. And if you put Didi Gregorius in there, and and to me, the real move that the Phillies are really going to move forward with is their third baseman, Alec Boehm. I mean, I think he's the real deal. So, in answer to your question, they can put in a pretty serious lineup to the point where they have averaged 5 runs a game. However, if they give up 6 runs a game, then they still lose.
Yeah, and I think it seems like what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, right? And their bullpen, it's been the same thing for a number of years now, where every guy they bring out of the pen, you're like, oh, here comes this guy, and you know what's going to happen, and then it happens on the field.
Well, Jeff Asch, what's your spin on the Phillies, Jeff?
Again, I keep using the word personnel. They need 2 starting pitchers. They need 4 relievers. They need a center fielder, and they need a shortstop.
And a partridge in a pear tree.
Other than that, they're all set.
That's a big shopping list.
And that's why they're a last place team. Everybody thinks all of a sudden.
Well,
they're going to play well. They don't have the players.
Let me ask you this: the 4 pitchers that they have, 3 starters, or even if you want to stretch it to 4, do you think that they were handled properly? And at the same time, when you say the answer to that, do you think they are better than what they have shown?
I hate it when, and I like Joe Girardi, but I hate it when a manager takes out a guy, even though it takes out a pitcher, even though the last 3 batters he faced, 2 strikeouts and a ground ball, but because it's a certain situation or a certain inning, he pulls them. And inevitably with the Phillies bullpen, that's what did him in.
Well, in that case, Jeff, you hate baseball.
I guess I do.
I mean, it's when you I always look at
the stats. You have to have a feel for the game, and I think he misused a lot of it.
Isn't this exactly what everybody said about Gabe Kapler, and that what everybody ripped him for, and said you can't just go by stats, you have to have a feel for the game. And
anybody doing it
He was going to
Bill?
be the savior. Everybody loved him. He had this great, wonderful.
Is anybody doing it differently in baseball?
No,
give me a name. Give me a name that's doing it differently.
What's wrong with baseball?
Well, I always look at it this way. If the starting pitcher or the guy you got out there in the 6th or 7th inning, he's still gone 7 innings. If he's better than anybody you got in the bullpen,
stay with him.
Bingo.
Yeah, but nobody does that.
No.
A World Series when they took Snell out in the World Series game. That killed them. That was the worst move in baseball history, taking Blake Snell out in that World Series game against the Dodgers. That was a terrible move. That was dictated by the stupid analytics people, and they'll blow up those departments across the board in all sports.
It seems so simple, Bill, and you're absolutely right. And I'm sure a lot of fans, particularly Tampa Bay fans, were looking at that and saying, WTF? What? I wouldn't have done that if I was the manager. And I just think that that's the way baseball has gone. And pitching. What did Yogi Berra say about pitching? He said something like
the game.
Yes, exactly.
Connie Mack said the same thing. It's 80% of the game. If you don't have great pitching, you're not going to win.
80% of the game and 90% is mental or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
But apparently Dombrowski, by the way, as you know, Bill, when you interviewed me on your show way back in the spring, you asked who I thought what moves the Phillies should make, and the first thing I said was, well, if they're going to pay the best money in baseball for the best player in baseball, let's pay the best money in baseball for the best general manager in baseball. And the first guy I thought of was Dave Dombrowski. His track record is terrific. He is a guy, I think, that judges players by what he sees them do, as opposed to what is next to his chart on the analytics numbers. And I want to ask all you guys about, your faith in Dave Dombrowski. And apparently the first thing he's doing is addressing the Phillies pitching situation. Bill, you got an idea on that?
Well, the first guy you wanted was Theo Epstein, but he wasn't available because he's going to be an owner. And the Phillies were not willing to give him a part ownership of the club. So Dombrowski was a good selection. But again, the one thing that really has haunted the Phillies is their lack of a minor league system producing players. You look at every team in the division, Miami, Atlanta, Washington, even the Mets. They all have guys coming through their system. The Phillies had very few. Alex Bohm and one, and Reese Hoskins is the other. The rest of those guys are just pedestrian players at best.
Well, the Phillies for the longest time had a homegrown infield. And the two corners that'll probably start the season are homegrown. The second baseman, if you move him out of center field, which I think you should do, and put him into second base, is homegrown. And you're right, Bill. They're not really as stacked with homegrown players as they were, but they do have the infield pretty much intact. And I think that if they just fill in some pieces, it's important to the center fielder. Your catcher, pitching, shortstop, and center field, right up the middle. If you can solidify those positions, and you look at the teams who have been successful, those are the positions that the need has to be filled. I want to ask, did Joe show up or Jim Murray show up, Jackie?
No, not yet. Mm-mm.
Okay, so the ones we have heard from are the only ones we have, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Well, and we have, is there going to be a hard sign off at the top of the hour? In other words, we're going to lose the Zoom?
Oh, I don't think.
Bill?
No, we're good.
We're good? Okay, fine. I just wanted to be sure. I wanted to be aware of how much time we had here on that. The situation with the Phillies. Let me get back to Bill Werndl. Bill, obviously, we were just talking about pitching, but Realmuto is one of those once in a millennium, I think, kind of player. Like he beats all the odds when it comes to catchers. If not, he's fast on the bases. He really knows the game, and he's. How many times? Let me ask you this, Bill. How many times do you get a 5-tool catcher?
Not very often, especially a guy who can run a little bit, has a great throwing arm, leads the major leagues in throwing out base runners. I mean, you talk about a guy that is a real threat, and both offensively and defensively. It's Realmuto. And the other thing is with Realmuto, if they ever come to the DH in the National League, which I hope they don't, but they could use him as a DH and let him rest a little bit.
I think
they also could play a little bit first base. And the other
I think
rule out the possibility of Reese Hoskins being traded this year if he gets off to a good start. Because I think there's a lot of talk in the organization about moving Bohm from third to first base, and that would allow them to move Reese Hoskins. Yeah. This is the time that Reese Hoskins plays well the first half of the year. I would certainly entertain discussions about moving him possibly for a starting pitcher or two.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think that the Players Association has turned down the universal DH.
Okay.
Is that true, Jeff? Did you hear that?
Because I hate the DH. I think it's softball. That's what it's basically.
Well, then you should be a happy man, because the Players Association, I believe, have turned down the universal use of the DH. And in addition,
they also turned down expanding the playoffs.
Right, the expanded playoffs, right. Yeah, well, let me ask you this, Jeff. How many teams should be in the playoffs?
Two. The winner of the National League and the American League. I'm really old school.
Yeah, 1960s
Well,
stuff.
That's right.
In that case, the season is over by May.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Well,
I think it's fine the way it is now. I just think it gets so diluted. If you keep expanding the playoffs, it really just makes the regular season meaningless. And I know that, like you said, you want, or like you were implying, that you want more teams in the playoffs so that the games are meaningful as the summer moves on. But I just think it's a joke that if you make the regular season meaningless. So I think where we are right now, please don't add any more teams.
Merril Reese, let me ask you, the National Football League has agreed to play 17 games now. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so. Mm-hmm.
And that is anybody in disagreement with that?
I think the players are crazy to give up the 16 game schedule and allow the league, but it's all about money. That's all it is. It's just another game for them to play. I think the body takes so much beating in 16 games, and you can't keep them healthy throughout that. To add one more, so you say, okay, so you take away some of the preseason games, but the regulars don't play much in that anyhow. They play a series here, a series there, a quarter there. So, frankly, if I were a player, I would not vote in favor of a 17th game. As a broadcaster, I'm fine. I'd rather have an extra. If you're saying the total equation is 20, I'd rather have 3 preseason games and 17 regular season games than I'd rather have 2 preseason games and 18 regular season games, which is the next step from an interest standpoint. But if I were a player, I think it's too much for the human body to take.
Well, let me ask you this, Merril. On the college side, do you think college football should expand the top 4 to the top 6?
Yeah, that wouldn't be for the playoffs.
Yes.
Yes, because there are always
top 8.
big
I would
debates.
go top 8.
There are always big debates.
I would go top 8.
Wow.
Yeah, I'd be fine. I don't think he's wrong. I don't think he's wrong about top 8 also, because college basically only has a 10 or 11 game season. But
the top
too
8
many teams. You have these debates based on their schedule and everything else, and a really good team, as Central Florida is always being left out.
Well, and in the case of Cincinnati this year,
Cincinnati.
right? But would the top 8? Let me ask you this, Bill: would the top 8 just allow a couple of more SEC teams to be in there?
That's the sham of the whole thing. The Power 5 conferences control the people that are making the decisions about the playoffs, and that's what really bothers me. You guys mentioned Cincinnati. Coastal Carolina had a great year this year as well. I think it's really a shame that schools like that, because they're not in the Power 5 conference. But you know what the Power 5 conference says to the people making the selection? We're going to move on from the NCAA like they're threatening to do in basketball, in which they have no power in football, but they still have some input. But the thing is, they'll rattle their sword, say, if you start taking big games away from us, then we're going to start our own conference, the Super 5 conference. And that's what the NCAA is afraid of. The NCAA should be disbanded immediately. Mark Emmerick and his band of merry men should be gone. They have not done anything for collegiate athletics in the last number of years. They are a sham complete.
I'm happy we're talking about. He wakes up in the morning and the first thing out of his mouth is Howie Roseman, and he talks about Howie Roseman for 12 hours before he goes to bed. So I'm glad you got him on another topic.
Let's get back to the home teams here. The Philadelphia 76ers are really facing a real test tonight as they play the Los Angeles Lakers. And Joe, you produced the pre-games and the post-game shows for the Sixers. Is without a doubt, this is really going to be a test here. But what have you seen, Joe, this year with the aside from the coach? What have you seen this year with the 76ers that gives you any indication that they will be better than they were last year?
Hey, Tom. Well, I actually do the Flyers, but I have filled in on the Sixers this year as well. I think you see a little bit different from Embiid. I think you see a more driven player this year. I have a major problem with the whole load management stuff across the NBA as a general topic, and I feel like, but with Embiid, I actually think that it does him well. And I think you see some spacing on the floor. The thing that concerns me is I feel like Ben Simmons looks like a different player in some games. And then in other games, you see those teams at the end of games where they just wall him off and they know he's not going to shoot. And it's like playing with four guys on the floor.
Well, do you have any problems with the 76ers not getting not making that big trade?
Oh, for James Harden you're talking about?
Yeah.
I'm not a Harden guy. I think Harden's a guy that wrecks teams, and I think that'll end up happening with Brooklyn. I understand that early in his tenure here with the Nets, you've seen him give up the ball and share the ball, but I think that is destined for Kevin Durant and James Harden to have a issue. And that's not even including Kyrie in the equation there. I feel like James Harden is a guy who, when he was with his other teams, he'd rather put up 40 points and have his team lose than put up 18 points and have his team win. I just feel like he's been that guy. He's a ball dominant guard. I'm not saying he's not a super skilled player. I'm just saying I don't know that he's the player that wins big games. And
well, there's
I don't have a problem with the Sixers not, trading.
Well, let's get back to the 76ers. Obviously, the coaching change has made a difference. And I talked to Bill Werndl about this a couple of weeks ago when he invited me on his show. I see a different attitude among the players. And I think that attitude, if only because, hey, Doc Rivers is a very successful basketball coach and probably the best guy they could have hired, number one. But number two, I had a problem last year, and I talked to Bill about this, with the 76er players being too tight with the owners. And I think when that happens, it really dilutes a lot of the power and emphasis that the head coach has. Because, and I'll cite just one example. Hey, the coach says, Ben Simmons, I want you to shoot more threes. I want you to shoot more threes. How did that work? I don't care if he really has no faith in his shot. I don't care whoever says about Ben Simmons is a terrible shooter. When the coach tells you to do something, you do it. And I think maybe the subtle background to all of this was, yo, coach, me and the owner are tight. We go out drinking together. Well, and I always use the example of Billy Cunningham. When he went from player to coach, when he did that, some of the guys he was going to coach were guys he played with. And believe me, I was broadcasting the Sixers games back then, and Billy Cunningham put up a solid wall. That's it, guys. And I'm quoting Kevin Costner in my favorite show, Yellowstone. I have found it very hard to manage guys who are my friends. And I really think that was a big part of that whole situation last year. What do you think, Joe?
Oh, I completely agree. And I think actually it was, I want you to shoot 1 3 a game. Wasn't it just, I want you to shoot a 3 per game was what Brett Brown wanted. And it just didn't happen. And there was no, okay, well, you're not doing what I want, so maybe you're benched for this many. But there was none of that. And to your point about the friends with the ownership, I mean, we're seeing pictures of Joel Embiid with Michael Rubin at water parks and having all kinds of fun. I mean, what is a guy like Brett Brown supposed to think when they see this kind of stuff on social media?
Exactly.
Your power's gone. You're exactly right. And there's no way a team with that sort of cloud hanging over it is going to win anything. There's just
Bill.
no way.
Let me, Bill Vargus, what's your spin on this? Is Bill still with us? Bill Vargus.
No, I think Bill left.
Okay. Well, Bill Werndl, we talked about this on your show. the relationship.
Predict that Ben Simmons will not finish the season with the 76ers. I think the Sixers are upset they couldn't get a deal done with the James Harden. I didn't want James Harden here, but look at Morey, the general manager or the president of the club, whatever his title is, that he is going to move Ben Simmons. The great point was the other night when Embiid did not play, Ben Simmons just went through the motion. So I predict that Ben Simmons will be in another uniform by mid-season. See you later, Ben Simmons. You got a lot of ability, but you have to be a total player. And right now, he is not a total player.
Well, I've seen some difference in the way he is playing this year, and he's driving to the basket more. And he's what, 23 years old. I don't really want to see Ben Simmons leave because okay, he only scored 10 points. Yeah, but look at the other blocks. How many assists did he have? How many rebounds did he have? How many plays? Even though he looked awkward and wasn't really involved in the actual scoring of the ball, as they say, he facilitated a lot of plays. So I don't know, Jeff Asch, are you in favor of keeping or letting Ben Simmons go, Jeff?
You know what I'm in favor of, and I think my colleagues may agree, is to send Herb McGee down to the Wells Fargo Center and the next 3 months just teach him how to shoot the basketball.
That's something I suggested about 3 or 4 years ago.
Did you?
Maybe it's beneath them to do that, and maybe it's
they had the guy working with Markelle Fultz, Drew Hamlin, right, a few years ago.
Yeah, how'd that work?
It didn't work, but I mean, he's a shot doctor or whatever they call him. So why not?
No, they needed
something.
Apparently with Markelle Fultz's situation, they needed a psychiatrist more than a shooting coach.
Yeah, and it might be the same thing with Ben Simmons. I just don't understand the object in basketball is to score more points than your opponent. And the only way to score points is to put the ball in the basket. That's the way you
However, on the other side of that, it's also good to keep your opponent from scoring more points than you have scored.
No, I understand that, but you still
can I say something?
Go ahead, Merril.
You're talking about Ben Simmons, and you're saying about Ben Simmons the same thing we say about Carson Wentz. We expect something. We want him to move to the next step as far as being a shooter is concerned. We've had Ben Simmons here for several years. He's not a rookie. He is what he is. Carson Wentz is what he was last year. Ben Simmons is the same Ben Simmons that you see night after night. He's suddenly not going to become Stephen Curry. He's not going to be that. He's never going to be a prolific outside shooter. He's rarely going to shoot. That's who he is. Carson Wentz is going to stand back there and wait. That's who he is. They are not flat tires. You cannot fix them.
Merril, you know how good it is, Merril. You know how good it is, Merril, to hear you talk basketball. I mean, let me see. While you're on a roll there, let me see how you do with hockey. Give me your spin right now on the Philadelphia Flyers.
I think they're a very, very good team, and I think they've got some bright young players. They've got one thing that you really need to be a great hockey team, and I'm not a hockey aficionado in any way, shape, or form, but I know in Carter Hart they've got a great young goalie, and that's like having a great young quarterback or a great young center. He is the most important player on that team, and they've got good coaching. They look like they're cohesive. They look like they're motivated, and I think they've got a chance to go very, very far.
Joe, you produce the pre and post game shows.
Yep.
How do you see the Flyers this year? Thank you, Merril. I love when you talk hockey, Merril. That's good. Or Jeff.
I can talk golf too, Tom, if you want.
Well, let's see how much time we got. Once we get past the Philadelphia Union, maybe we can touch on golf.
Isn't that after it?
Yes.
I thought the Philadelphia Union was after it.
Never.
Wrong union.
Joe. Go ahead, Jeff.
No. I just said wrong union. No, let Joe talk hockey here.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. So in what I mean, I produce all the pre and post games, so I've seen every minute of every game this year. They it is concerning the way that they play defensively when you consider that Matt Niskanen retired, because I don't feel like there's Al Morgani likes to say it on our shows. There's an adult in the room to kind of go back to when all things fail, get the puck back to him because he's the adult in the room and he's going to make the smart decision. Provorov has shown to be that in the past.
Well,
I would say 2 years ago, but Provorov played like a different player when he was with Niskanen last year, maybe showcasing more of his ability to play offensive from the defensive position. And this year, you've seen some lapses. Now, Sean Couturier being injured is a huge deal because he usually takes care of the top center or the top forward on the other team. And right now, you don't have that. And they got Eric Gustafson was their off-season signing and defenseman. And quite frankly, outside of the first game where he scored, had 2 assists, he doesn't look terribly interested in playing the defensive part of the game. And that's kind of been his reputation on the other teams that he's played with. And I feel like that was a big issue.
On
and
the
they
defense,
had Shane Gostisbehere in there last night. And
on the defensive side, you've also lost number 5, who probably is one of the most underrated players in the game. And he's for a guy who was not drafted. I mean, he's terrific. And I think when he comes back, but what you mentioned, a go-to guy, don't you think Kevin Hayes is a go-to guy?
I think he's a go-to guy, but I mean, I'm talking more specifically about the defense,
okay.
where it was kind of like if all else fails, get the puck to Matt Niskanen, and he's a veteran. He's won Stanley Cups. He's the guy that's going to, like I said, the adult in the room. I do think Kevin Hayes is that too, and I think Kevin Hayes' role as a leader with this team is emerging, and we talked about it last night during our shows. That in his second year with the team, you saw him the other night when they got beat 6-1 by Boston. He was very outspoken after the game. I'm not sure you hear that from Kevin Hayes last year in his first year with the team. I feel like he can be more of a vocal leader. Claude Giroux, the captain, that's not his style to be vocal, at least not with microphones in front of him. And I do think Kevin Hayes' role as a leader on this team is definitely emerging.
And Tom, I wanted to bring up the name of Claude Giroux in that, to me, he's the Carson Wentz and the Ben Simmons of the Flyers.
Really?
That we keep expecting him to score 50 goals and have 50 assists. And, he just, that's not him at this point of his career. And by the way, I still think Claude Giroux is like 25 years old. I can't believe he's 33, 34 already.
Right.
But in order for the Flyers to be successful, I think Giroux's got to have a really outstanding season.
Hey, one other analogy. Every year the Phillies are going to fix Velasquez. What happens?
Right.
This is the year they're going to teach him how to get the ball over the plate.
Yeah.
Well, maybe he didn't have the right teachers back then. And I said that I want to give Joe Girardi, who handles pitchers all his life, basically. And I want to give the new pitching coach, a little fair shake. As I mentioned earlier, Merril, I really believe the 3 starting pitchers, you want to throw Velasquez in there, make it a 4 starting pitchers that they have. I really think that they're better than what they have shown. And maybe what you're saying is right. Are we ever going to see the real Velasquez? But the other 3 guys, I think Zach Eflin, to me, he has really picked up a notch in his pitching game. And I think, don't forget, these guys have been guided by 2 different pitching coaches over the last couple of years. And I think once they get the impact of Joe Girardi, who is a pitcher's catcher and also a pitcher's manager now, I believe, I think, you still got Velasquez, Merril, though. So if you're going to give him another try, give him another try.
Listen, I don't know that much about hockey, but I do think that in Doc Rivers and Joe Girardi, that the baseball team and the pro basketball team in town have two of the best, quote, manager coaches that are in the entire game.
Well, let me jump in on that. And I do believe that Alain Vigneault should have been the coach of the year in the National Hockey League. In my estimation, Merril, I don't think the Flyers could have a better coach. This guy is, the first time I got to talk to him, his last regular season game before he got fired by the Rangers was with the Philadelphia Flyers in Philadelphia. And I wanted to go talk to him after the game. And as I'm walking to the Rangers locker room, or the coach's locker room, my phone rings and tells me that the Rangers have just fired Alain Vigneault. And I'm ready to talk to this guy within the next 2 minutes. And I got to believe he has found out, but it was such an awkward situation. And I just said to him, I've always believed in you. I would really, at the risk of tampering or whatever, I guess you can't now because you're fired. I said, but Alain, I would like to see you here in Philadelphia as coach of the Flyers. And so to extend on your point, Merril, you're absolutely right about your other two managers. The Phillies are really fortunate to have Joe Girardi. And Doc Rivers, they could not have selected a better man. And I really believe that the Philadelphia Flyers have, to me, a coach who should have won Coach of the Year, the Jack Adams Award last year.
I'm sure you're right. I do really respect your opinions. And as far as the Eagles are concerned, I tend always to be more optimistic. I'm somebody who sees the glass half full. So I'm looking forward to seeing and meeting Nick Sirianni if we ever get out of the Zoom stuff and we can actually go down there and meet people in person. And I'm anxious to meet him. I know that Frank Reich, for whom I have the highest respect, thinks highly of Sirianni, and maybe he comes in here and is the next wonderful coach. They had one in Doug Peterson, and now I hope they have another one. He's bringing in his staff, and I can only hope.
Well, I'm more optimistic than you are. I'm a very optimistic person all the time.
I know that's you.
When did that start?
Hey, listen, guys, I got to get ready for my show. I appreciate having me on today.
Billy, I want to speak for all of us. You have never looked better.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Bill, thanks for your contributions. And have a good show, Bill.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Let me ask Jackie or Bill, how are we doing on time here?
We're doing great. It's 1:00, and if you still have anything you want to talk about, that's fine. Or
well, let me ask the panel. We've covered all four teams. Is there anything we have left out that we should address about any of the four teams?
You might just add, since this is a Philadelphia forum, to talk a little about the fact that I have never seen our college basketball, and with the exception of the great Jay Wright in Villanova, I've never seen the other teams struggle the way I have. And I don't know the reasons. I think they, I know that I have a lot of faith in Aaron McKee, and I think they know what they're doing. Ashley Howard over at Villanova. I don't know the Sixers coach of the St. Joe's coach very well, but I think they're like one in something in the teens.
They haven't won it in the Atlantic 10. I think they're 0-8.
Yeah, there's just college basketball here has really, with the exception of Villanova, it has really declined.
I would agree.
Well, it's still the most unique situation of anywhere when it comes to college basketball. No other city has 5 major basketball programs within the city limits, extending maybe Villanova, as the Philadelphia basketball fans have in the Big Five. And, I think when I always refer to this when I think of the Philadelphia 76ers, the fans are really, not only if the fans are hard on the Sixers, it's because they know they can go to the palestra. If they don't think the professional basketball players are doing what the fan thinks they should do or playing the way they should, the Philadelphia basketball fan can go to the palestra or Old McGonigal Hall or out to Villanova and really see good college basketball.
They'll never get into Villanova. They'll never get a ticket for a Villanova game.
Well, I'm just saying.
Of course, everything is
Yeah,
attended. No real fans. But normally,
I'm using that. I'm using that as an analogy.
Boy, that's not easy.
Yeah. Right, you're right. You're right about that. Maybe
that might be the toughest ticket in town.
But what I'm saying is because Philadelphia fans, maybe because, as you mentioned, Merril, it's a down year for Temple and Penn and certainly LaSalle. But the Philadelphia basketball fan is so used to seeing good college basketball that when they see something in the pro ranks, whether it's the 76ers or whether it's a team the 76ers are playing that night, they are so sophisticated and knowledgeable as basketball fans. They just won't stand for anything that's not what they think is up to what their standard should be. I think
I didn't mention Penn, but Penn's another good team, another team with a good young coach. But of course, they're in the Ivy League, and they have tougher admission standards and everything else. But they're not going to be the only team that we have that is capable on a regular basis of being a top 20 team is Villanova.
I think part of the problem is that the fans, it's not the Big Five flavor that it was certainly 25, 30, 40 years ago.
No.
Because a lot of the players on these teams don't necessarily come from Philadelphia, where they did 30, 40 years ago. A kid would go to Bartram or Franklin Learning Center, and then he'd go to LaSalle. Now they're recruiting from all over the country, and it doesn't have the Philadelphia flavor it once had.
Well, I think, Jeff, I think a big part of that, and I always look at something that really leveled the playing field for college basketball, which basketball, by the way, is the only sport really where one player can make a big difference. And I think when they made the freshman eligible rule come into effect, okay, I'm not going to be able to start for Villanova. I'm not going to be able to start for Louisville or, Kentucky. But I can start for Butler, and I'm going to make Butler a big power, which has happened in the past. Mm-hmm. And I think that may be the case where the big power that the Big Five teams had and the success they had may have been diluted by guys who say, well, I can go somewhere else now. And it's really leveled the playing field to the point where it may have diluted the power and the big efforts that the Big Five had as far as power in basketball. I really believe the freshman eligible rule, which came into effect a couple dozen years ago or something, has really had a major impact. And I think when the best example, as I mentioned, was Butler. And
the eligible rule came into the effect in the late 60s or 70s.
No, I think it was later than that. I think it was.
No, it
wasn't. Well, maybe when was the freshman? Well, football's a different thing, bro.
I'll bet you it's 30 years ago.
Oh, is it really?
Yes.
Look it
up.
Well,
Tom, you're talking about like, so for a long time there, obviously we saw guys like Kobe and Kevin Garnett and or not Marcus Camby, but they came right out of high school. And you're talking about when they put the rule back in, right, Tom?
Yes. Yeah.
So I think what you see is you have teams like Kentucky, they usher 8 players to the NBA every single year.
Right.
And 7 of them aren't ready to play.
They recruit them for 1 year.
72, 73 was freshman eligible.
What year?
72, 73.
73. Okay.
73.
Well, I didn't think it went back. Well, it takes a while for that to filter into the whole picture here. But I think
going almost a half century.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
Hey, Tom, just to go back to what you were saying about the Philly flavor and the Philly kids, if you think about what's happened here, now the other programs have had some coaching turnover, and there were legacy type coaches that are no longer at those other programs, whether it be a Fran Dunphy or, I'm not going to say John Giannini was a legacy coach, but he was there for a long time at LaSalle. Whereas Jay Wright has been there all the time. And Jay is not so heavily even into the Philly players. He gets some. But you look at a situation like a few years back when Pat Chambers was coaching at Penn State, he was getting 2 and 3 kids from Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
When do you ever remember hearing Roman Catholic
maybe,
or any Philly kids are going out to Penn State to play basketball? That never happened.
Can I
Well,
make a
maybe
statement?
maybe my mind is being fogged by the one and done in
Tom,
basketball.
can I make a statement? Could we say, without any hesitation, in all sports, in all college sports in the Philadelphia area, that Jay Wright is the best coach we have ever had in all sports?
Well,
I mean, I think the only, if you're considering, are you considering Penn State the part of this area?
No, I'm talking the Philadelphia area. No,
I think I don't even think it's close.
Jack Ramsey.
never won one national title, let alone 2.
yeah, but he went on to win.
Go by that measure. I'm just
NCAA
throwing
champion.
out, iconic names.
Oh yeah, they've been great coaches.
Well, yeah, but look what some of the players. Let's look back at the underdog teams. Like, and a guy you work with, Joe, who I just think is one of the greatest basketball minds I've ever talked to.
Jimmy Lynam, we love
Jimmy Lynam, and look at little Jimmy Lynam. I say little Jimmy Lynam when he was playing for St. Joe, and what they did back then against the odds, and even LaSalle with Tom Gola went against the odds.
And of course, John Chaney's in the conversation, but these guys, like, none of them, like Merril said, none of them have done what Jay Wright did. I mean,
you're right.
If you just take that first national championship year, I mean, the second national championship, they pretty much walked to the national championship. But the powerhouse teams that they knocked off in that first national championship is an amazingly legendary run.
I mean,
and I really
right up there.
Merril, I
He's
think
there with the great coaches. He's right up there with Coach K. And
I was just going to say that.
He's right there with Coach K now.
You beat those guys, Merril, then you're absolutely right about that, because most of the time they're perennial favorites, and Coach K, or back when Pitino was in charge, and Duke and Louisville, it's
Carolina?
like North Carolina, and you're right, and Jay Wright went again. But look at when you think of the Big Five basketball coaches, though, they talk about the Andy Reid tree. Look at the tree of basketball coaches that came out of the Big Five.
It's endless.
It is. It really is. And I think it all goes back to the culture. And even though it's in a downturn right now, but the culture of basketball in Philadelphia goes just right, dovetails right to the Big Five and the Big Five programs of all. Yeah, well, look what wasn't Penn a surprise team not too long ago? They snuck in there, didn't they?
Penn does a good job.
Pardon me?
Penn does a good job.
Yes, exactly. And as you mentioned, you have to be a student athlete at Penn, which I'm not saying, Villanova has a good high rate of graduating players, but in most cases, let me ask you, when did the one and done come into play in college basketball?
I think Dwight Howard was the last #1 pick that came right out of high school, which was, I believe, 2006, off the top of my head.
Okay.
And then you had John Calipari just has made, whether it be when he was at Memphis and now Kentucky, John Calipari has just made, I mean, maybe I'm a little bit old school.
2006.
Yeah.
2006. Okay. Maybe Merril, my mind was fogged by the one and done thing, and wrapping it in with the freshman eligible. But in addition to what you're saying, Jeff, John Cal, he'll tell you right off the bat, I'm preparing these guys to play in the NBA.
Yeah.
Bingo. And if it's one and done, they certainly aren't going to be students.
Well, he's the master of the one and done. I mean,
bingo.
He knows how to recruit a guy. Say, look, I know you're only going to be here 1 year. That's great. And then he just turns them over, although he's having a lousy year this year. One thing I wanted to say, though, about when we were talking about Big Five basketball is that I think, and we were talking about coaches, I think it starts on the high school level. Just think about how many fantastic Hall of Fame high school coaches we've had in the Philadelphia area over the years, with Speedy Morris and Clarence Turner and, just goes on
How
and
about
on
the
and on. Joey
How about
Goldenberg.
how about the head coach of the team the Sixers are playing tonight?
Well, how about Mike Pettin?
Wildwood High School. How many times do you hear Wildwood High School mentioned in the pro ranks?
Yeah.
And the head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers is a former Wildwood High School coach. And
What?
You know,
So wasn't Greg Roman from Atlantic City or someplace?
Holy Spirit.
Coordinator of the Ravens.
Holy
went to my
Spirit.
high
That's
school.
where Chris Ford went to Holy Spirit.
They both went to my high school. Yes.
Yeah.
Holy Spirit.
I'm not old enough to remember those names.
Well, I'm old enough to play with Chris Ford, Dad of Holy Spirit. But the athletes that come out of Philadelphia, and you're right about the coaching they had from the very beginning with the high school ranks. And let me get back to football, Merril. Do you know that 3 head coaches, you probably do, but 3 head coaches in the National Football League all went to Philadelphia Catholic high schools? Do you know that?
One would be Joe Judge.
Yes. And how about the coach of
Sean McDermott went to LaSalle.
Went to LaSalle.
Joe McDermott.
And
another one.
Ed Stefanski's son.
Ed Stefanski, St. Joe's Prep.
That's right. Yeah. Now,
Pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Kevin Stefanski. His dad was Stefanski.
I always looked at him as Ed Stefanski's son because I remember when Eddie used to bring that little kid to the Sixer games and used to hang around on the sidelines. And now he's the head coach of a pro football team. And
that's Kevin. He played football at Penn.
And I really believe Sean McDermott. Let me ask you this, Merril. Sean McDermott should be a strong candidate for Coach of the Year.
Absolutely.
And now who do you like in the Super Bowl?
Kansas City.
Oh, well, really?
Yeah.
All right. So
Kansas
you're not going to see the Tom Brady dream to its conclusion.
I hope not.
Well, a lot of us hope not, I guess, but it's I
like both coaches because Bruce Arians was the head coach at Temple. Quick story. They used to have a cherry and white day at the end of football spring practice. And Bruce Arians invited me and Stan Waters, who was my color man at the time, to come to cherry and white day. And he let me call all the plays for the cherry team and Stan called all the plays for the white team. We were the offensive coordinators that day.
Well,
so I will always be grateful to Bruce Arians. He's I'd love to see him win. I just don't want to see Brady win his 7th Super Bowl. And I love Patrick Mahomes.
But that puts you in rare company, Merril, because Bruce Arians has admitted that he lets Tom Brady call all the plays.
That's right.
Wouldn't you if he won 6 Super Bowls?
Pardon me?
I said, wouldn't you let Tom Brady call the plays if he won 6 Super Bowls?
Exactly.
I was going to say he lets Tom Brady.
I'm still sorry that when the Eagles beat them in Minnesota, he ran into the locker room. He wouldn't even go over and shake Nick Foles' hand. And then I saw him do this summer. This year, he lost another game. I don't know, it was to the Rams, where he threw an interception to end the game. He ran right. If he loses, oh my goodness,
he's not a good guy, right? I've heard players who have played in the National Football League say the same thing about that, Merril. And it's a shame. I mean, of all he's accomplished, but you know what? I never really appreciated Andy Reid in Philadelphia as much as I'm appreciating him now with Kansas City. Some of the plays he draws up, that 4th down play in the who expected that? Nobody.
You know what, Tom? As good as Donovan McNabb was, he's got one now that can throw the football from 93 different platforms.
Yeah.
Plus, he's got Tyreek Hill.
He's the most talented quarterback in the National Football League.
And he can throw it 30 yards underhanded.
Yes, or left-handed.
Donovan McNabb never had Tyreek Hill.
So, Tom,
yes,
we opened up the YouTube to questions for the panel, and we have actually one question. And it's from our friend Lee Richards. And she says, who do you think will be the next big Philadelphia sports superstar, like Iverson, Mike Schmidt, Wilt Chamberlain, or Kobe?
Wow.
Devonta Smith after they draft him.
Well,
Wow.
I think the player the Phillies just signed yesterday. I think he fits in there somewhere. Let me ask you. Well, I was one of the questions I was going to ask Jackie, all of our panelists.
Huh?
What team in Philadelphia do you think will win the next championship?
Villanova.
Professional team.
I know.
I would have to say, this is going to be surprising coming from me. I would have to say the Flyers.
That's who I was going to say.
Joe?
I think the Flyers is a good guess. I don't. Here's the thing with hockey. I feel like it's way more of a lightning in the bottle sort of sport than the other three professional sports. And if you have a goaltender that gets hot, I mean, we saw it with the Devils. They were a dynasty because their goaltender stole how many games for them in the 90s and the 2000s. So I feel like they're the best. They have the best chance. I mean, I feel like the Eagles have a lot of work to do now to get back to that level. I feel like
here's the strange thing, though, guys. I have to say this, and Jackie, the thing I do have to say is people are talking about, oh, there's a long rebuilding program before the Eagles are relevant again. Let me tell you something. In this NFC East, you could throw a blanket over all four teams next year and somebody will emerge. And it wouldn't shock me with a play here and a play there that the Eagles are back in the playoffs. Maybe as an 8-8 playoff team or a 9-7 playoff team, but they could be back in the playoffs next year.
Well, let me get back to hockey. It's certainly very unusual, and it may have a lot to do with who ends up winning the Stanley Cup this year. But when you're playing the same teams all year long, and every team that you play is in your division, every game you play is a division game, that certainly has a lot to do with who's, it's like the original six. The Bruins played the Rangers played the Bruins, and that was the way it is now. The Flyers all of a sudden are playing each of their opponents 8 times. That doesn't happen much. And where else does that happen in sports, where each team in the division plays each other 8 times? That may have a lot to do with who comes out on top.
Well, other than baseball, because of the sheer amount of games and the way that the schedule is structured with the series and all. But I totally agree with you. I think the issue with this season is when everybody looked at the division the Flyers got put in, they were like, oh man, that division's stacked. And the stacked teams, you're talking about the Bruins and you're talking about the Islanders, the Flyers, you're talking about the Penguins. Nobody was talking about the Devils. Nobody was talking about, there's some other teams in there that have gotten off to hot starts, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, are there going to be 7 teams that are relevant in this division? Because the playoff setup is that the top 4 make the playoffs and the rest don't. So you're going to have 1, 2, 3 potential good teams that don't make the playoffs because of this division setup.
Exactly.
I mean, it's going to be a fight to the finish. I mean, look at New Jersey. Maybe they're doing it with smoke and mirrors. We had this discussion last night. The Flyers were entering last night the worst shot differential team in the NHL. The Devils were 3rd, but they were also among the top teams in the division. So I think that goes back to the point Merril made about the Flyers maybe being the most likely, because I think numbers can be deceiving in hockey more than any other sport. Because, goals go off guys' pants and stuff. And we've talked about analytics before. I think analytics are the worst thing in hockey. I think they mean less than any other sport. And because of things like, Jake Voracek got an assist the other night because he shot the puck off of Travis Hanheim's skate, who didn't know the puck was coming and it went in the net.
Well, yeah, but then you have a case of what James Van Riemsdyk did last night.
Oh,
when you talk
amazing.
about a play, well, let me ask any of you guys, when you talk about a player's skills that diminish because of age, I don't know whether hand-eye coordination can fit into that category. You know, maybe you slow down, maybe you can't skate as fast, maybe you can't run a route as fast as you used to as a wide receiver, but maybe your hand-eye coordination is still there. And I'll tell you, one of the toughest things to do, I think, in any sport is what James Van Riemsdyk did last night. He redirected 2 shots. One of them was a redirected shot to begin with, and was able to navigate that puck into the net. And, you know, hand-eye coordination, Merril, jump in here on that.
Well, Brady still has it. Brady still has it. Brady still throws it 50 yards downfield and hits a receiver in stride. Drew Brees, finally, age caught up to him in injuries this year. But some of these quarterbacks, boy, it's amazing to me how long they can function. Phillip Rivers had a good year at 39 and then retired. It's and the pounding they take. So yeah, they can still do it. And in golf, we just saw Tiger 2 years ago win another Masters.
I think so what? Pardon me?
I said Merril snuck golf in there.
That's okay. That's okay. That's fine.
We belong to the same club, so.
Well, I think we've probably covered everything there is to cover in sports in this area or the whole country. I don't know. And
well, it's been fun. It's been a fun hour, whatever, being along with you guys. I appreciate your opinions. It was great. It was great. It was great to have Billy Werndl with us, and he's always amusing. And then I know it was nice to have Bill Vargus for as much time as he had. So he's a great guy too.
And
I love when you talk hockey, Merril.
And you know what? I knew absolutely nothing about any sport when this started.
And now you know less.
And I still don't. Right. But I want to thank everybody. I think it was a terrific afternoon.
Thank you.
I want to thank Tom Lamaine for being the MC, and for Joe Fordyce and Jeff Asch and Bill Werndl and Bill Werndl, okay, and Merril Reese and Jimmy Murray, who happens to be watching. He wasn't able to log on, but he was watching probably for the last half hour.
Jimmy, hello from all of us, and we hope you're well.
Yeah. And
well,
Richards,
Jackie,
I've been seeing it a long time.
Jackie, thanks for putting this all together.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye.